The family of a local teenager says she never would have left home without calling.
Just praying for the best. I want my daughter home, man. And if she can't come home, I just want to know where she's at.
These posters around the towns of Livermore and Jay beg anyone with information to come forward. Posters that Richard puts up every spring, never losing hope.
Tell me what happened to my daughter. Just look me in the eyes so I can see her.
An arrest in a nearly 4-decade-old cold case. Thanks to cutting-edge DNA technology, the arrest happening exactly 39 years to the day
when Parabon Nanolabs used that sample to create 3D models of the suspected killer's face.
It's heartbreaking. We miss her, and we're going to find her. We're going to keep looking till we do.
It's like a never-ending nightmare. It doesn't end. It keeps returning and coming back.
What if I told you that on a cold night in Pennsylvania, a deaf woman reportedly left behind her husband and 2 children without telling a soul? What if I said there was a blizzard going on outside, and despite that, she left her purse, vehicle, hearing aids, and glasses behind? And what if I told you it's been 40 years since anyone has seen her? Tonight, we speak with Alison Duiker, who gives us her perspective of what happened with her mother, as well as the immense impact it has had on her life.
So tonight we're joined by Alison Duiker, and she is the daughter of, I'm going to screw it up again, Lonene Rogers. And
Yes.
she went missing January 7th, 1981.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Can you tell me a little bit about your mom?
Sure. So my mother was the oldest of 3 daughters. She was also the only deaf child. So when she was born, there was no knowledge at the time when she was born that she was deaf. She was about 2 or 3 when my grandmother figured that something was wrong, like just the whole not responding to her name, and found out that she was deaf. Now, she was deaf as a result of something that went wrong in utero, something beyond their control. And she did go to public school, and I think my grandmother kind of insisted. She did not want to send her away anywhere. That was a time where, if there was a disability, you sent them away somewhere. And my grandmother said, no, there's nothing wrong with her. The only thing that's different is that she can't hear. And, we're going to help her through. And that's that. So,
good for her.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like before special education was like a thing. My grandmother absolutely refused to send her away and said, nope, we'll help her. So that's a fun story. She did go to a school in Youngstown that by the time she got to high school, they did have it was a small group, but like maybe 5 or 6 other hearing impaired students, group of them in that high school. One of my favorite stories is that she was in a high school and the seniors were doing a senior trip and they were going to a concert. Well, the trip was scheduled and organized, but it didn't include her class because they're deaf. So why would they want to go?
Wow.
And she was irate. And what I'd like to share about my mother is that, she was a dancer and she loved music, and all of my grandparents were dancers, and, they would just sit around and put the music on and dance right then in the living room, and the neat thing about my mother was that, they say that your other senses make up for the loss. Mm-hmm. And she could feel the music probably better than you and I and anyone else, because she just, wow. It was part of her. Like it took over all of her being when she would hear it, and not hear it like you and I, she would feel it and
right.
would dance to the sounds, to the vibrations. So back to the story, my mother was irate, like, why can't we go? That's ridiculous. And was kind of arguing about wanting to go. And they told her no. So my mother, on her own, arranged a car wash to raise money for her class to go on their own. And she did it. They raised enough money for all of them to go to the concert. They went not with the school, but on their own, and still had the same experience as the rest of the seniors. And I think that's what I want to be known for.
Good for her. Wow.
That's awesome.
I love that story.
Yeah. So she seems like someone that's going to take action and take care of things.
Right. And stood up for other people, and herself and what was right.
Now, you were young when she disappeared. You were what, 6 years old?
I was days from 6. I was actually, so it happened January 7th. I was 5, and then my birthday is January 12th. So I was just days from 6.
Oh, geez.
I can't imagine. What are some of your memories of your mom that you remember of her being a mother to you, and maybe talk a little bit about your communication with both your parents?
So I don't have a lot of memories. I kind of feel like there must have been some repression there. What I have a couple memories. One hair, and I reached up and grabbed the curling iron, which is probably why I remember that, because I burnt my hand. So I do remember that because I burnt my hand, but it was kind of like gazing at my mother, and she was so beautiful, and watching her do that. A lot of the memories I've kind of created from stories that people tell me. So different things, like, for example, my mother is deaf, and my aunt would say that when she'd come over, they'd be in the living room talking, and she would get up before they would even hear me crying. She would get up, and they're like, "Where are you going?" And then they would hear me cry. Like, how she would know, like, it's so crazy. But several people told me that she just had this sense, like she just knew that, I was about to cry, or I needed her, or whatever. But it's kind of neat to know that there was an instinct there to know that her child needed her, or was waking up, or that was to hear that. You asked communication. So both she and my father were deaf. So my mother was deaf as a result of what happened. And my father was deaf at the age of 3 from a car accident. So he was in a really bad car accident that resulted in deafness, or hard of hearing. So 2 different ways of becoming deaf. When we were born, there was always, the fear or maybe the interest, because they were deaf, so it wouldn't be scary to them. But wondering, whether the 2 children, myself and my brother, would be deaf, but obviously we are not. The way we communicated. So the neat thing about sign language is it's American Sign Language, and it's very much like mime. Like, for example, this is tree. Well, doesn't it look like a tree? I mean, it's really neat that a lot of it is like mime. I mean, you can tell what it is. Morning, the sun's coming up. So I picked up sign very quickly. They teach babies how to sign milk all the time, and different age of 3, I have like those old, those reels, 8mm. Is that what it was called? Those big camera reels that
I know what you're talking about. I'm not sure what they're called though.
I can't remember. I want to say 8mm, but that might be wrong. But there were a few of those that I was able to get my hands on, and we transferred into VHS, because this was years ago. And I saw myself at like 3 signing to my parents and saying, hey, and, signing back to them. So it was really neat. And early on, I became their ears right away, because I was the hearing child. So, if they needed something, they could easily ask me to tell someone if communication was a problem there. So right. I became their ears right off the bat, basically.
Wow.
So not only did I communicate with them, but I communicated for them.
Cool. And so where did your parents meet? Do you know that?
I do know that. There was a club is a club that's called the Erie Silent Club. So it's a club where people who are deaf or hard of hearing like to go and gather and kind of congregate and hang out. And she went there and he went there, and they met at that club. and pretty much started dating, I think, immediately after meeting. We're smitten with each other. And I don't know how long it was. It wasn't long. They dated for a short period of time before they married.
Wow. Now, to skip ahead to January 7th, 1981, I'm certain that most of these things aren't your memories. It's probably what you've been told and what you've learned through research, correct?
Right.
Now, were you aware that your father had a history or a background of some not so good things?
Not until recently. So I pretty much have taken on investigating this case full time in June. So in about 6 months ago, I sent for a criminal records report because I knew that he had been arrested. But again, that was just, an aunt told me, an uncle told me, it was all so-and-so said. So I wanted to see for myself what exactly he was convicted of. So I sent away for criminal records from 2 different counties because he lived in Erie County before they were married. And then after they were married, he lived in Crawford County. So I sent away to both of those clerk of courts and was shocked. So I knew that he had a criminal past, but I didn't know all the particulars. So the records that came from Erie were like 50 pages, 56 pages, I think.
Wow.
It was unreal.
Holy.
And I have them right here in a big thick file. This right here is from the clerk of courts. That's 56 pages of crimes that he committed in Erie County.
What type of crimes were they?
All of those are, well, but one, are thefts, robberies, break-ins. This one was in Crawford County, but one was he worked at a bar and he robbed the bar and staged robbery. Now, unfortunately for him, he broke the glass from the inside out, so they caught him. But he literally shot a hole through his hat and said that he was robbed. They broke the glass and they shot at him, and look, they got through the hat.
Oh my gosh.
But it missed his head. And so he was convicted and went to jail for that one for misrepresenting facts to the police or something like that. And then the robbery and all of that. But the most serious or egregious one was from 1969. And it was then a friend broke into they followed a college girl from a bar to her apartment and were caught red-handed by the police raping 2 girls.
Oh my gosh.
So my father and this other man. And somebody in the apartment complex or whatever kind of building it was, somebody heard the woman screaming and called the police, and the police literally broke in the act. And
wow.
He got, you can't deny it. They caught him in the act. He got 23 months in jail and then was released after 6 months on probation for good behavior.
Well,
how does that even happen?
Jeez. Exactly. And I didn't know that until 6 months ago.
Wow.
I don't, and that happened before my mother disappeared, before all of these other crimes, all of that I showed you, half of that happened after that time. Breaking into cars, breaking into homes.
Can we, for the people who don't know anything about this, can we go to the night or even the events leading up to your mom's disappearance?
Sure.
and sort of what happened there?
Yes. So based on what I just said, my mother was never, goody two shoes, never in trouble. And I'm sure she thought she would change him, but she didn't. You know, it was crime after crime after crime, going to jail, getting jail time. The first couple break-ins were slap on the wrist, a fine, this, you know. When my brother was born, so my brother and I are 3 years apart. So when my brother was born, he was actually in jail for breaking into, I don't even remember which one it was, but breaking in and stealing something. So my mother had just had enough. It was chance after chance after chance. And I know what it was. It was, my mother was trying to get him, you know, on the up and up, and had him start volunteering at the fire department. Well, then he broke into the fire chief's garage and stole tools. So that was the end of that, and the end of my mother's patience. And she said, so in October, before she disappeared, they separated. She told him to get out. He went and moved in with his parents. She did let him come and see my brother and I and visit, but they were formally separated.
Right.
Then the holidays were coming. He is quite the charmer, which is probably how he married her. But he charmed his way back, and she felt bad. And so she said, for the holidays, so this started in October, they were separated. So she said, for the holidays, meaning Christmas time, you can come back and stay at the house, you know, be with the kids for this magical moment, you know, of the holidays, but then you have to leave after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came back and refused to leave. So holidays come and go, and he refuses to leave. So January 7th is when she's had enough. And based on what I've been told, I can surmise that she was planning to leave him then, because he wouldn't leave. She had gone earlier that day to her father and asked to borrow money so that she could leave him, you know, and put the plan together. My grandfather said, all I have is $60. Now, he gives her the $60 and said, that's all I have on me. And she leaves his home, comes home with the money. My mother, they argue. So the people that lived underneath us reported to the police that they heard arguing and banging and whatnot. He reports that they argued. He went to bed. He woke up at 2 a.m. and she was gone. So at 3 a.m, he takes my brother and I to the babysitter, who was also deaf, and, you know, wakes them up. There wouldn't be any calling because they're deaf. So, you know, wakes them up at 3 a.m, and the normal drop off time was, I believe, 6 a.m. So at 3 a.m, he drops us off. Now, this woman was good friends with my mother, and he says, she ran away with another man. I have to go find her. Now, the babysitter is concerned, because you would think that she would know something like that, being good friends, and she knew nothing of this. But her dilemma was, she was deaf, and she didn't know what was happening, so she didn't wake up her hearing children until whatever reasonable hour. I think it was like 8 a.m. is what I heard. And then at 8 a.m., her hearing child called my grandfather, my mother's father, and told him, you know, what had transpired. And my grandfather immediately went over to the house, kicked open the door, the apartment where we were living, kicked open the door, and said that when he got there, it was pristine. So your wife leaves you, you're fighting, you've got to all of a sudden get your kids up at 2 o'clock in the morning, beds are made, dishes are done, nothing's out of place, everything is where it's supposed to be. So you all of those things at 2 o'clock in the morning, it makes no sense.
Right.
But that's what my grandfather discovers and is instantly concerned, calls the police. The police come. Now, this said the police were there like later in the afternoon, and my father came home with my brother and I, and the police were there, and my grandfather, and I don't know who else. And they were, they're arguing, yelling. My brother and I go into the living room, and they're continuing to yell and whatnot. And what I've learned in, my research is that the police did kind of like pat him down and, check his pockets, wallet, blah, blah, blah. And in his wallet, when searching it, they found $60. They said to him, where did this money come from? My grandfather loses it because he knows where it came from.
Right.
And my father offers, Lonnie gave it to me. So that money was meant to leave him, not whatever he wanted it for. So that was a really big piece to the puzzle. There's also the babysitter reported a pink blanket was missing. So it was a queen size cotton bright pink blanket. When he was asked, where's this blanket? He said, I don't know. I don't know where it went. It's never been recovered ever.
Yeah.
So let me back up and say that when he dropped us off, it was 3 a.m. He arrived to work at his normal time at 6 or 7 in the morning. So what happened during all of that time in between, he claims that he was looking for her. I don't think he was looking for her.
Nope.
Right. Wow.
And the police at that time, I'm guessing they probably took his word for it that she ran away. This is a small community. Big crime doesn't happen there. They did not search his vehicle. They claimed that they searched the apartment, but as I said, everything was pristine and in its place. He had been known to argue and fight by choking. Later in life, he also did that to my brother. It was just when he got really angry, that's like his go-to. So my thought is that you wouldn't have blood if he choked her. So I don't know that even if they looked, they would have found something, because I'm guessing that's probably what happened. I'm also guessing that when he took us to the babysitter, she was in that vehicle.
Oh,
what kind of vehicle was it? Was it a car?
It was a Ford Bronco.
Ford Bronco?
Four-wheel drive.
So she could have been in the back then.
Right.
Wow.
But the police never searched the Bronco.
What did the police end up doing? Did they...
They did foot searches. They did helicopter searches. They searched the woods around there. But basically, when it came down to it, they said, without a body, we can't prove a crime was committed. And that was like the line for years.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if they were given something, they would follow it up, but there was never anything.
Do you know if they had to have pulled up his background to see what was on his record, you would think, at the time?
You would think, but 40 years later, when I just figured that out, I asked actually how I knew that this crime, how I got to the point of wanting to ask for the records was I got a message on Facebook from the wife of the other man who was arrested with my father.
Oh.
And she said, I don't know if you know this, but her husband was arrested with my father that day. And I when she told me the story, what he was arrested for, I thought, sir, I'm dumb cat. Hold on one second.
It's a crazy story.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay. Sorry.
What baffles me is that did the wife there, did she just find out that her husband was a convicted rapist?
So the friend's wife?
Yeah.
No, they were married at the time, and she was pregnant with their first child when that happened, that friend. So I never knew anything of this woman because I never knew anything of the crime. So when she said that, I thought that can't be true. I would know something that horrible. And so I reached out to the investigator at the time and said, can you look this up and see if this actually happened? Because, you know, this woman is saying this and I just find it hard to believe. But if it's true, I want to know. Right. So she said, yeah, I'll certainly look it up. Now, at the time, she's telling me, yeah, I'm not sure. You know, she didn't know. So when I then say to her, can you look this up and tell me if this happened? She said, it's going to take some time because that was a long time ago. We got to search through the files, blah, blah, blah. I'm the one that gets the records from the clerk of courts to say it did happen. Well, she did tell me it did happen, but I got the records myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they didn't know. Now, at the time, did they know? I don't know. You would think that the current investigator, if they did have that information, it would have been in the file and with a big red flag, something like that.
You'd think.
But when I said to her, did this really happen? And she says, I don't know, it's going to take time to research. I don't think they did know.
Wow.
They won't tell you. So, you know, the truth is somewhere out there.
Now, did they ever give a lie detector to your dad?
So they asked him if he would participate in one. He said he would. And then he got wind that my mother's sister was trying to, like, she took me somewhere to try to get hypnotized and like doing different things to try to find information. So he took my brother and I to his sister's house, which was a good 40 minutes from that apartment. Mm-hmm. So he had us leave. His sister is hearing, and then he tells his sister, I'm going to go and do this lie detector test. The police want me to do this. And she said, don't do it. So the next thing you know, he's got a lawyer and is not willing to talk to them anymore, not willing to do the lie detector test, and never did.
Wow. Has his story changed all over the years?
Nope. He said she ran away with another man. That's been the story the whole time.
And she never tried to make any contact, right?
Nope. Never made contact with anyone. No family, no friends. No, not the children. The Social Security number never had a hit ever. Bank account never had a hit ever after that disappearance day.
Now they actually found some stuff of. Sorry, they actually found things of your mom's at the apartment, right? That's something that you typically would take with you when you leave.
Oh yes. So the night that she disappeared, she left behind her purse, her car keys, her car, her hearing aid, her glasses. All the things that you would need to be functional in society.
You would think.
He left behind. It was also a blizzard that day. So the snow was, it's just an area where the snow is bad. It's a snow belt is what we call it. But it was snowing and blowing and drifting. And I also want to point out that not more than 100 yards from the apartment, my great-grandparents, her grandparents lived. So catty corner to the house, not even, it's like corner to corner.
Yeah.
100 yards away, my great-grandparents lived, and she was very close with them. So if she needed to escape, she would have went there. Right. There was also a church on the left side of the apartment and the fire department across the street from the church.
Right.
So there were lots of options in a blizzard for her to go to. But none of that happened.
Did he ever try to give a name? Did he just make an assumption that she went off with another man, or was it? Did he sound like he? Oh yeah, she absolutely went off with another man. But did he say a name?
I don't know that he knew the name, but there was a man. So my mother cleaned apartment or hotel rooms, and there was a man who was an engineer at the same hotel that she cleaned rooms. Now there was a significant age difference. I want to say he was like 20 years older than her. And they went to lunch together a few times. And I think he was really trying to help her get out of that situation.
Right.
But someone saw them together and reported to my father that she was seeing someone. So I'm pretty sure that that man, who's not alive anymore, they fully investigated him, and he was home with his wife and helpful in any way he could be. Was very sad when she disappeared. But that man, I'm sorry, I lost my thought. My father knew about the man because of a picture that someone shared with him. I'm not sure if he knew the name, but I'm sure that's who he was talking about when he said she ran away with a man.
Wow.
With the in that area, you said it was what, 3 or 4 hours gap there before he got back to work. The area that you lived in at the time, would there have been a lot of places to dispose of a body? It was pretty rural area, or
yes, very. And it still is. I mean, it's a little more developed now than it was then, but there's a lot of it's a very heavily wooded area. I will say, though, that hunting is a passion for a lot of people in that area. So there's people in and out of those woods for years, every year. So there is a creek, a pretty substantial creek that runs through that area called French Creek. But again, it's also an active creek. People hunt, fish, trap, canoe up and down it. There's, canoeing, boat rentals, and different things. So I can't imagine that somebody wouldn't have seen something in 40 years if she was there.
Right. That's so weird. Because timeline wise, right? He had about 4 hours. So at maximum, he could drive 2 hours just to drop her off somewhere. But you would have to take into account actually disposing intelligently to hide the body. It would be more like an hour and a half one way or the other.
I will also say, so the distance from the apartment to his work is 29 minutes. So consider it's a blizzard, snowy weather. He's driving.
Right, that's a factor as well.
Yes, he is driving a 4-wheel drive Bronco. So, I mean, that'll help him get through the snow. But on a good day without any other factors, it would take, according to MapQuest, 29 minutes.
And that's the other. Well, like roads being trash. Like if you're gonna go out on some back road, it's not gonna be as easily accessible. And
so you add in the time that it took to clean the apartment as well.
Oh,
right. Drop off the kids and the drive in. That window gets smaller and smaller. So he had to have stayed local.
However, we don't know when he truly woke up before he woke us up.
Oh.
So maybe he never really did go to bed. Maybe they argued and then he.
Right. I didn't even think about that.
Up.
Yeah.
Was it verified that he was at work all day as well? Like, did he work his full shift?
He did. Not late. Stayed the whole time. Left when he was supposed to. Didn't act alarmed. Now, I will say that the babysitter reported that when he showed up at the door with us, not to mention it's 3 a.m, she said that he was sweaty and appeared nervous. Now, it's a blizzard and he was going in and out of vehicles, so there's anxiety there and whatever else would cause him to be sweaty.
Yeah, the time spent before work, I guess, could have been cleaning the apartment. If the night before was, after whatever happened, he had tried to hide her somewhere, I guess.
Right.
But still, with the blizzard, that does narrow. I think should narrow a lot down distance wise and areas that would be accessible.
I mean, I would think. Winters in that area are pretty fierce. So by that point, nowadays we don't get heavy snow until like February, March. But in that area, I would have to think that the ground is frozen solid. So I can't imagine he was doing any digging. He probably hit her to come back and do something when the ground was more manageable.
Yeah. That's awful.
Just theories, but.
So does PD still have this as an active case still, or are they calling it a cold case and they are hands off with it?
So it was never officially called a cold case, even though it is, or it was. If you ask them, they would say it's an active investigation, has been for 40 years, that they've been working it for 40 years. I know that's not true. However, in the last 6 months, between me doing podcasts, blasting all over Facebook, I did a news interview in that hometown, in my hometown, and calling people, letters to the DA. I've been doing everything I can to put attention and pressure on this case. So I feel like they're doing more now. It's just been so long. It's been so long, and the leads that should have been followed long ago, or the possibilities weren't. So where do you go from
Right.
here?
Yeah. So what was your childhood like after, this happened? You're 6 years old, your mom's missing, your dad's telling you that she ran off and she didn't want you apparently anymore. Can you describe what that was like for you and what happened during your childhood?
So growing up, after my mother disappeared, we went to stay with my aunt, my father's sister. And I say we because it was my younger brother and I. And we were there for, I want to say 2 years. And then he took us back, but that never lasted long, meaning he was either abusive, neglectful, and children's services would be called in and we'd be taken away. And in the early years, we'd be taken back to his sister. Later for me, like as I got older and started to question more, around 10 years old, I just started to recognize how much violence I was seeing from my father and just the anger. And I started to question, a little bit in my own head, not verbally, could he have done this? And I feel like I was a target from him because I probably I probably reminded him of my mother in a lot of ways. So I think that, things were harder for me because of that factor. So there was a time I ended up in foster care. I ended up back and forth with neighbors. He just didn't want to be a father anymore. Then he did, or children's services would step in and say, you can't just drop your kids off at a neighbor's house. You have to be a parent. And that continued until I was 14. So from 6 years old until 14, I was all over different school systems, different families, cousins, neighbors, friends, all over the place. And then at 14, a pretty amazing thing happened where the guidance counselor at the school, I was in 8th grade, and that school was a grade 5 through 8 school. So in 5th grade, I had actually been at that school before Children's Services took us away. And she was involved in that whole transaction, like trying to help us and get us through with Children's Services. And then we were removed from that school. So when she saw that I was back in 8th grade, she thought, oh boy, this can't be good. Called me into her office and said, how are you doing? And of course I said, fine, good, fine, good.
Right.
The pat answers. And she knew that if I was back with my father, it was not good. And that particular day, October 14th, she kind of called my bluff in knowing that it wasn't right and wrote her home number down on a piece of paper and handed it to me and said, if you need anything ever, no questions asked, give me a call. I was like, okay, and put it in my pocket, not really thinking anything of it. So that night, October 14th, is also my younger brother's birthday. So my father said we were going to go into Erie, which was about 25 minutes from where we were living in Waterford. And he said we were going to go into Erie and celebrate my brother's birthday at a restaurant. Well, his girlfriend also showed up. So he was in a pickup truck, just a single cab. And he got in, the girlfriend and my brother, and then told me I had to sit in the cab. So the weather in October in Erie, Pennsylvania is very cold, sometimes even snowy. You know, it was very cold. So I'm sitting in the back, and as he's driving in 20 minutes, the wind at my face, I'm like crying. My tears are freezing to my cheeks, and I'm banging on the cab window, like crying and begging to come in because I was freezing cold. And the next thing I know, he ignored, all of that. And the next thing I know, he pulled into a police station and got out. And I thought, that's weird. But I just sat there and waited for him to come back out. He comes out and says, let's go. So I get out of the truck. I go in, and the police officer says, can you help me? I don't understand what he's saying. So I look at my father, and my father says, tell him you're bad and I'm not taking you home. So I sign at 14 to the police officer. He says I'm bad and he's not taking me home. And the police officer, says, can you tell him you can't just drop your kids off here? It doesn't work that way.
Right.
And my father says, I don't care. I'm not taking her home. The officer says, well, can you just work it out for now? And so this was a Friday. So he says, can you just work it out for now? And on Monday, we'll have, Children's Services give you a call and we'll see what we can do. He refused. He said no. So the police officer says to me, do you have anybody that you can call to stay with? And I said, well, you can call my aunt. That's where we always end up. So they called my aunt, and she said, no, I'm done with this. Tell him.
Jesus Christ.
And I was like, I don't know. So out of anxiety, I had my hands in my pocket, and I was like, I don't know. And I felt the paper in my hand. And he said, is there anybody else, like a friend, relative? And I felt the paper, and I'm like, my teacher gave me this today and said if I needed anything, call her. And I'm kind of being silly, but I didn't know what else to say.
Right.
So he's like, who is this? And I said, she's my teacher / guidance counselor, because she was part-time doing both.
Right.
And so he's like, well, I'll give her a call, see what she says. And he called her, and she said, I'll be right there. And the rest was history. They didn't formally adopt me. I always say I was adopted because it's just easier to explain than legal custody.
Right.
But they didn't. They just let it go at that because they didn't want to spook my through court proceedings and that kind of stuff. And he flat out in the meeting where they got legal custody, he flat out said, I'm not paying for anything. And they said, we don't need anything. We don't want child support. We just want her. Sign the papers and we'll move on. So thankfully, thanks be to God, that was my family and who I still call my family. I was able to live with them for 4 years before they encouraged me to go to college, and I did, and became a teacher myself. Now I'm a special education teacher, 21 years now.
That's really amazing, honestly. That's
awesome.
One of the most amazing stories I've heard.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, it's off the back of something terrible, but...
Right. But I do feel like it really helps me to be a better teacher. A lot of my kids struggle with all kinds of things they shouldn't have to deal with. And 9 times out of 10, I've dealt with it myself. So I think it makes me, those experiences make me empathize in a different way where I can relate to those kids and what they need.
And you probably recognize the signs quicker than other people would.
Yeah. And I'm thankful for that. My motto is rewrite the story. I say that all the time. So I feel like, people say, I'm so sorry about your childhood, and so am I, but I can't live there. I know, and I want to help people with it. I help my students and anyone that is struggling. I want to be a positive influence that you can overcome ugliness.
Right.
And I'm fighting for my mother, fighting for trying to find her, and kind of feel like I'm in a full speed ahead mission to find her because it's my father's 72.
Have you
Time.
I know you had told me before that you don't really have much contact with your dad or any contact since you were 14 years old, right?
Right.
So have you tried to reach out to him and ask him about your mom?
I have not. And for many years, I was very afraid. He was very violent, aggressive. I wanted no part of him. And to be honest, that was an absolute no way until probably the last year. So in the last year or so, I think the reality of he's old kind of,
Right.
came to the forefront. And what is he going to do to me now? And, having a family of my own and having that stability just gave me the courage to face it. Now, have I spoken to him? No. He did friend me on Facebook, and it was very upsetting, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I blocked him and did all kinds of things to try to make that private. But I did start a Justice for Lonnie page on Facebook, and we're up to 2,200 members now, and he is one of them. Oddly
No
enough.
way.
So on that page, someone said to me, your father joined the group. And I thought, no. So I looked at the members, and sure enough, he did. So I posted on the page, I see you. I know you're here. And I thought, why block him? He'll just make a fake name and join anyway. I'd rather know he's there.
Right.
So he has tried to, friend request me and different things. He did go to the home of the people that are now my family and try to find out how to get in touch with me. And they were like, they want nothing. She wants nothing to do with you. But other than that, no, I have not spoken to him.
Maybe he'd be willing to be honest and let you know what happened, maybe on his deathbed or something. I don't know. Like,
I've wondered.
I feel like
It's
sometimes
definitely in the close forefront.
when people get close to an age that they're questioning their own mortality, they want to get into heaven, so maybe they'll
I would hope so.
Real quick, what is the relationship with your brother been like? You still in contact with him, or did you maintain contact throughout all of this?
So he lives in Florida and has a family. So we don't actually live anywhere near each other. And growing up, we were often kind of pit against each other because my father was always angry with me. And so we didn't have a close relationship. I know where he is. He knows where I am. We talk every now and then through Facebook. But we don't really have a close relationship, but I do a family of his own and a job, and he's making the best of life.
Has he ever
that's
questioned?
good at least.
Has he ever questioned your mom's disappearance, or have you guys talked about that at all?
He and I have. He is a member of the Justice page, but he doesn't ever comment. He and I privately have, commented back and forth about different things. I don't know that he's really asked my father, nor have I. Like, I never point blank said, did you do this? Because I was afraid of the ramifications of that. And I don't know the answer to that with him, but I would imagine it's pretty similar, that, he too was too afraid of a violent reaction to even say that. I mean, it was like a swear word growing up. We weren't allowed to talk about her. You just didn't. We didn't.
Sad. So sad. For children not to be allowed to talk about or ask questions about their mom who allegedly left them.
Right. And there was never a time that he talked to us about her either. Like he never told stories or told us things that she liked or anything like that. You didn't mention her name.
That's awful.
Mm-hmm.
And that's by design, I'm sure.
Yep. And we weren't allowed to talk to anyone on site either. So, after when I was 6, after all of that, I found out later as an adult that they sent cards and money and all kinds of things. And I never knew any of that.
Unbelievable.
As an adult, we rekindled, you know, and I now have relationships with people on my mother's side, but I did not know that growing up.
Right.
So what's the name of the Facebook page again so that our listeners can join if
It is
they're still
called
inclined?
Justice for Lonene. And I also have been spending the last year writing a book, and the
nice.
book should be out by the end of January. I wanted so badly for it to be out on January 7th, the anniversary, but it's Christmas
Right.
and COVID and everything else. So, but it will be done by the end of January. A Daughter's Journey, a story of resilience.
Nice. Hopefully
Fantastic.
you can share that link with me once
sure.
that comes out so we can share it on our page as well.
I would love that. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we say goodnight?
Just that I do want to ask your listeners to join that Facebook page. I have total confidence that it's community resilience that is going to find her. There are
Right.
so many people that say, you know, I wish I could help. And then there are so many people who say, hey, I have an idea. And those ideas turn into something. For example, one of the members of the group said, you've got to reach out to this podcast called Locating the Lost. Somebody said that to me, and I can't remember if they reached out to you or if you just saw my page.
No,
But-
I was on your page and
okay.
they had mentioned us. And so I said
Okay,
thank
I
you
was
to them.
going
And
to
then
say
somebody else
someone
mentioned
said
us
it.
too.
Yes,
so.
yes. But that's the example. Like there's so much that you might not know me, and you might not know my mother's story or be from anywhere near me, but you might have an idea that's going to help us solve this case. So I just ask your listeners to join the page and look over some of the details. And if they have any thoughts or ideas, please share them.
And
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank
Great.
you very, very much.
I appreciate you.
Yeah. And we wish you all the best, and hopefully you're going to solve your mom's case any day now.
I hope so.
It sounds
not
like
gonna
you're
give
making
up,
some
so-
headway. It's
I feel like
good to
it.
hear. Yeah.
I feel like it.
Stay strong. Keep doing what you're doing.
I will. Thank you so much. Okay.
Have a good night.
You too.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
We would like to thank Alison for joining us tonight to share her story with us. It's a truly tragic and humbling one, but it also shows us what a little compassion can do to turn someone's life around. So please, if you can spare some time, go and join her Facebook page, Justice for Leone. And if you're interested, her book is currently available for pre-order on Amazon, A Daughter's Journey and Story of Resilience. And as always, thanks for listening.
The search for 5-year-old Taylor Williams led investigators to Alabama this week.
So we have some breaking news from Florida. An arrest has been made in
Tonight,
connection.
after years of agony, a glimmer of hope for the family.
Investigators spent hours searching through this house off Pennsylvania Avenue.
What could be a major development in the search for missing Alabama teenager.
Tonight, a stunning twist in the search for Taylor.
Somebody out there knows something.
They want to lay him to rest their way, not by somebody else's way.